Yeah. Lovely. Right, so I've got in front of me my plan already produced and an extract that will definitely not be appearing, okay, annotated. And I've got this. Everyone's going to get one of these, which is a little blurb you have to do before you start. Okay, I've got 8 minutes. We haven't got time for questions because it's right at the end of a single period. So I'm basically just going to start it with an introduction. Notice as well, kind of say, I've got my introduction, 3 sections and a conclusion. I've put timings next to each of them to try and keep me on track in terms of time. That's a nice little hint. I would recommend you do that. So my name is Jonathan Cottrell. My candidate number is 1234. I'm doing standard level language literature. The extract I've been given is from part 1 of 1984. And it's where Winston first writes in the diary. This is a really, really important scene because the scene is structurally broken in half. The first part is where he makes a rebellious act by writing in his diary, and what he writes in his diary is worthy of thought crime, which I'll talk about presently. Then the second half of the extract moves on to the consequences of that, i.e. the state. So structurally we've got a break between the individual and the state, and this is contextually relevant because it was written in the time just after the Second World War where totalitarianism was on the rise, and there was this battle between contrasting ideologies that Orwell was very concerned about. So for me, this extract is structurally it's essential because this is a scene where we establish 2 things: the battle between the individual and the state, but also the inevitability of the state's victory over Winston. I'm going to talk about this in 3 sections. The first is the power of the state and how that's depicted in the extract. The second is Winston's rebellion, which although it comes first, I'll be talking about second. And finally, how this leads to the inevitability of capture. So first of all, the power of the state. Thought crime, okay? It's a portmanteau of 2 words, thought and crime. The idea here is that they're juxtaposed because thought itself is crime, which is very unusual for us in a dystopian sense. Even to think something is criminal, is something that the state can and do, is explained here, act against. The scariness here of the attack, of the imminent attack that is envisaged by Winston, is something almost mythological or horrifying. They come in the middle of the night, okay, almost vampire-esque, all right? The arrests inevitably happen at night, the sudden jerk out of sleep, the rough hand shaking your shoulder, the lights glaring in your eyes, the ring of hard faces around the bed, literally surrounded, metaphorical ring of hard faces there. We also see that this complex sentence lists all the different things that are going to happen to you, one after the other, and they're quite disorientating in that sense, just like, which mirrors, obviously, how it must feel like. Notice the use of the word there. I don't have line numbers on this, unfortunately, but they are bound to get you, all right? Doesn't specify who exactly. Finally, they have the power to delete people. There is no trial. And also, people simply disappeared, always during the night. Again, that repetition of night, and it is in second person. You were simply removed from the register. Every record of everything you had ever done was wiped out. We have the semantic fields of eradication and removal. They are in charge of society. You are then forgotten by who? By society, which they control. You are abolished, annihilated, and then vaporised. Okay, vaporised is capitalised. We've got a nice rule of 3, and the alliteration, abolished and annihilated, which is very, very violent lexis we have going on there, which again reinforces the power of the state. Winston's rebellion turns up very, very simple. It's a simple act of writing in a diary. The diary is a motif that's utilised by Orwell to show his innermost feelings, which is what diaries are used for, but also as someone to talk to in the limited narrative voice that Orwell employs. We've got his automatic reaction, which is again very animalistic. We've seen that in 1984 before. And we've got here this helpless musing automatic reaction. Okay, we've got the simile to describe how he's writing in his diary. It's instinctual, it's animalistic, and I think this refers to the human nature and how it's impossible to be oppressed. That something in the human nature wants to fight, wants to rebel, will react against totalitarianism. Notice how he writes here. It's very, very figuratively written, very beautifully written. His pen slid voluptuously, almost personification, over the smooth paper, printing in large, neat capitals. There's a sensuality, a passionate truth here, okay? There's a sense of automatic or unconscious or subconscious release or relief that's going on through his act of writing, delineating his thoughts. Then in the text, there's a very nice structural feature that's used. We've got an actual break in the text. Now, Orwell could have very, very easily just written "down with Big Brother" and repeated, but he doesn't. He takes the opportunity to literally, physically separate and segregate the text, and what he does with that, he then writes in "down with Big Brother, down with Big Brother, down with Big Brother," again and again. He writes it 5 times there, and then finishes off saying it's filled half the page. Very, very strong impact. He wants us to show us literally what was written, and that gap in the narrative and that repetition and the fact that it's capitalised really does enforce what's been going on in Winston's mind, and also this subconscious need to fight against authoritarian rule. In that sense, it's quite hopeful. What breaks that hopefulness, though, is the third section which I want to talk about, which is the sense of inevitability. And the inevitability here is done through lexis, such as which implies certainty, such as he knew it was useless, he's impotent, it made no difference, okay, in the 5th paragraph there. Whether he went on with his diary or whether he did not go on with it made no difference. Again, that made no difference is repeated twice. The thought police, which is an interesting concept in and of itself, would get him just the same. So it really is inevitable that he will be caught for this. He had committed, so the thought police would get him just saying, he had committed, and then we've got a little break here. These drop-in clauses, explanatory clauses, would still have committed, even if he'd never set pen to paper, the essential crime that contained all others in itself. Here, the essential crime is thought crime, okay, which is a term which we talked about, but it also acts as a synecdoche for any act of rebellion, okay, anything that happens in the mind that could be against the state. We've also got this a very strong sense of foreshadowing, that this obviously goes on to later in the novel, where he is captured and taken to room 101 and is broken. And also that thought crime is, or thought itself becomes a real crime. So to take that back now to the original argument then, this scene happens very, very early on. It's useful for foreshadowing, it's useful for setting out the central conflict between the individual and the state and the powers, the ideological power struggle contained therein. But finally, I think it relates to one of Orwell's most important messages, and that this is 1984 is a warning. Okay, it's a warning of what the powers of totalitarianism and authority can do if they have power and unlimited power, and that goes unchecked. At this point, we still have some hope, but I think structurally, and that's important for us, so we don't get the ending away, and we're not too sort of disheartened by that. But I also think as well, it does foreshadow a lot of those scenes that come later on in the novel. Thank you very much.